People who make their living out of cleaning murder scenes, accidents and the like. What is the worst thing you have experienced in your career? I posted this on another thread, so just copy and pasted it, but this was one that I had to do clean up after a murder. It was a rehab house for ex-cons. 4-bedroom house with communal bathroom and kitchen. Sunday morning and Guy A is in his room listening to music pretty loud. Guy B is in the kitchen cooking his breakfast. B knocks on A's door and tells him to turn it down. There's a small argument and B returns to his breakfast and A turns his music up. So B grabs the biggest knife in the kitchen, kicks in A's door, and stabs him through his left shoulder, entering by his collarbone. A runs out of his room, across the landing, down the stairs, out the front door, back inside, back up the stairs and collapses on the landing. When I got there it was like a scene from a movie. Walls and ceilings, everywhere A had been, were caked with blood. Apparently after B stabbed him, he returned to cooking his breakfast. There was a half-eaten breakfast in the kitchen when I got there. I mean, you're already going to jail at that point. Might be his last home-cooked meal ever. I work in the I was told by someone that works for a funeral home that they had to go get a girl that had overdosed and passed away. They said she had her breasts augmented and was pregnant. Turns out she overdosed while taking a bath and had decomposed enough that her breast implants and the fetus were floating around in the water. Then I clocked out and had lunch. Not me personally, but my dad used to be an EMT/firefighter. In the late 80s, he got a call about a horrid smell coming from the neighbor's house of the person calling it knowing what it was EMT, firefighter, and police were dispatched. They found the house was owned by a single old lady who died in her living room chair. Not too bad, right? Wrong. The chair was an old leather recliner, and as she was decomposing she melted and fused with the leather chair. When the EMTs got there they had to remove her from the house, and when they tried to pull her off, her back skin, arms and lower body separated from the rest of her body and remained attached to the chair. Decomposing flesh, blood and organs fell out and all over the chair and floor. People were vomiting every 10 seconds and couldn't stand to be inside longer than a few minutes. My dad describes the smell and scene as the worst thing he has ever seen. Her body was so decomposed she was basically liquid inside with a fragile shell. He had to leave and grab a full respirator from the fire truck, and even then it didn't do jack shit. The others took turns going in to retrieve the pieces so they can be disposed of. When they were finished they burned the chair in the front yard. Holy yes, this is the worst one. I had a great uncle who helped clean up the bodies left behind by Hurricane Audrey in 1957, and he said that the smell persisted in his nose for weeks after. It got so bad that he went to the doctor to see if they could do anything, and they clipped all of his nose hairs and the smell went away. It was explained to him that the smell had soaked into the hair, but I don't claim to know the validity of that statement. The hurricane hit South Louisiana in June of that year, and most of the bodies recovered were found in the saltwater marshes that cover the area. So it's safe to assume that they were in an advanced state of decay. I've heard it said that the smell of the decomposing bodies was so bad that the alligators would actively avoid the areas, but I don't know the validity of that either. I've also heard the nose hair thing from a WW vet. He added he shaved his whole beard too. I wasn't sure if I should believe it, so if someone confirms or denies that would be cool. Working for a tow truck driver that get the calls after crashes. The worst one for me was a family of 6 coming back with over 10 pizzas for a baseball team. It was a head-on with a tractor trailer, 18-wheeler. The ambulance took the bodies away, of course. Everyone died but one little guy. There was so much blood and vomit. Diapers. Toy dolls covered in blood. The pizza was everywhere inside of the car, like 2 foot thick on everything and all over the road. There were so many backpacks and things just covered in pizza blood. It is hard to even describe it to this day. It was oozing out all over the road and was like an exploded pizza pocket. Everyone that was waiting in the traffic jam looked horrified. Hey, as a former 911 dispatcher that called on towing services relentlessly for various things, thank you for what you do. Our service was always so kind and patient with us, despite the fact that we were always calling to change exact locations of an MVA at the last second. Unfortunately, when people are shaken up from an accident, They don't always have the wherewithal to give exact locations. The towing dispatcher I would call was the best and never complained. I know nothing could have prepared you for what you saw that day, but I hope you find comfort knowing there are people like me who value the service you provide very much. I spent some time with the coroner to shadow for school. They were showing me different cases and going over them. Pictures included. The one that seemed to emotionally bother this particular guy the most was a scene where a father was coming home and pulling into the driveway. His daughter, 3 years old, was running to greet him, and he didn't see her and ended up running over her head. The pictures were heartbreaking enough. I can't imagine what the dad went through when he saw her like that. There was another one that had 3 bodies. Some guy killed his wife, his affair partner and her daughter, put them in a shed in the middle of summer and left town. They were found 3 weeks later. Basically piles of putrid slime, maggots, like fill 10-gallon buckets full, and bloated body parts sloughing off as they tried to bag them. The murderer had a pilot's license and has never been caught. The decomp room smelled for months after that. I'm pretty sure accidentally killing my toddler would be suicide inducing for me. That's so tragic. I'm so terrified of bothering anyone that as I read all of these I kept thinking stupid things like I hope when I die I turn the AC up really high so I don't turn too much into goo for other people to clean up. A family friend was a first responder to a scene where a young woman committed suicide by running onto a busy highway at night. A semi-truck hit her and essentially her body exploded. He described the scene of just picking up pieces scattered across the road in the shoulder. Edit. This got more attention than expected. The poor driver of the truck thought he'd hit a deer and didn't know it was a person until he saw the tattered clothing on the road. This happened probably 12 years ago. The story stuck with me because of how cavalier he spoke about it. Sadly, this wasn't the worst call he'd ever had, and there were a few he refused to speak about. This almost exact same thing happened about 30 miles from my house. A young girl jumped in front of a semi on interstate. The young lady was tossed into another lane of traffic. Shortly after that, my girlfriend, who was coming up behind the semi, barely missed the girl laying in the road. The young girl survived, barely, not being able to walk or do anything on her own. One of my first jobs after moving I did this, and the job that had me walking wasn't even as scene as described. We did all types of hazmat cleans, and the worst was actually a couple went on vacation and came back to backed up septic. Think about 1 foot thick hard dried out crusty septic waste spread throughout the entire first floor of a house. Not going further into detail here. Was nasty. Septic, not skeptic. On break and mobile. So yeah. One that stuck with me was a suicide in a bathtub. We couldn't drain the tub, so had to use a coagulant then scoop up the bloody mess into biohazard bags. Same for the toilet. Another was a suicide by gun in a basement full of boxes, which was a nightmare to clean as even the smallest bit of flesh had to be found and cleaned up. The smell of the smallest piece of flesh meant the job wasn't done until it was found. One scene. The cops thought it would be helpful to put newspaper on top of the leftover melted body oils which dried to the floors and was terrible to clean up. Sad cleaning up these things when family is in the other room as well. Not working the job anymore, but definitely gave me an appreciation for the hard work biohazard cleanup crews do. Mostly on call as well, so you never know how long you will be away from home. Edit. Another one that wasn't as gross, but felt straight out of a horror movie. Trailer where the person had squished what had to be thousands of pantry moths onto every wall. Living in pure filth. Had to have had a mental condition. Just really sad. Teen girl had to be pieced back together. Steering column went through her chest like a straw through a slice of cheese. Had to put the hamburgered heart back together.